keep going.
So, as an introduction, there was a setback a while back in the business world. So, SOX was introduced to ensure that the publicly traded companies have adequate internal control. They introduced SOX 404, where companies were expected to establish internal controls for financial reporting and assess them via auditors to ensure their effectiveness. In order to evaluate these controls, the auditors had to conduct walkthroughs where they talk to the different managers to understand the business and the process cycle of the company in order to make a judgment on the internal controls implemented. So, and with the new developments, business processes became more complex due to the amount of processes that occur simultaneously or with various lags. This compounded also the inability of conducting business in the ideal process design. So naturally, this complexity in going along with the business affected the internal control department and external auditors to go over these processes. So in order to mitigate for that, machine learning algorithms in the shape of process mining were introduced to validate information about companies and their business processes. So just a simple definition. Process mining is a tool developed by computer scientists to aid in identifying and analyzing business processes. In the early 1990s, there was a new area of research called workflow management and business process engineering. And this was used in order to redesign and innovate in business processes. But in order to you couldn't do that unless you have already the business process that is actually being implemented in every company. So some scholars thought that it's easy and it's already there, but others argued that it's very hard and also very costly to get that information. So by the late 1990s, a couple of papers appeared to tackle that issue. First of all, business processes specify the way resources of an enterprise are used. So each process is comprised of a set of activities that may or may not be dependent on each other. And the business processes are modeled as graphs with individual activities as nodes. The edges on the graph represent the potential flow of control from one activity to the other, and each edge is associated with a Boolean function to determine if the edge will be followed or not. So this is an example of a process where there are like 5 activities, and the edges are the flow from one activity to the other. So in the late 1990s, Agrawal, 1998, introduced the idea of applying process mining in a workflow management context. Their study proposed an algorithm that generates a graph model of the process given a log of unstructured execution. The aim of the algorithm was to present a graph that preserves all the dependencies in the log and is consistent with all executions. Another paper at the same time was written by Data. This paper proposed a framework and methodology for automated business process discovery. Their paper wanted to observe the behavior of a process and extract a formal model to account for that behavior. They used 3 strategies. 2 were algorithmic and 1 was probabilistic, to examine an activity stream of business processes and yield an activity graph model of the processes. So, how was that used in auditing? So, auditors currently use sophisticated computerized tools But these tools are just automating what they are already doing. They didn't re-engineer the auditing process. So the process mining was introduced as a way to kind of change the way of auditing internal controls. Van der Aalst, 2010, introduced an auditing framework by the name of Auditing 2.0. The framework presents two models, the de jure and the de facto model. The first one is what the company requires or wants its process to look like, and the second one is what actually is happening. So the de facto models are, but the actual models are reached by using process mining techniques to extract a Petri net that models behavior in the event log found in historical data. So this is kind of an overview look at the Auditing 2.0 framework. This is the design model, and over there is the actual model. And you can see that they're using discovering techniques from historical data to get this model. Then they can do all of these analyses in the auditing phase. So the auditor can perform multiple tests to validate the company's process. They can check if the historic data in the event log conforms to the desired model in order to detect deviations, locate and explain them, and measure their severity. Auditors can also diagnose de facto models by using model-based analysis techniques to check for deadlocks and other anomalies. You can also compare the models to know if there's any significant difference between what you require and what is actually happening. But I have to respectfully disagree with these two. I mean, the extend model and promote model, I don't think an auditor's job is to do that. I think this is an internal executive thing to do. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, it depends. Are you talking about external auditor or internal auditor?
External. Yeah. And he was talking about external auditing. So the aim of analyzing the event log is to determine how the process was undertaken, who was involved in the process, and what happened with a particular transaction. Jans et al. 2014 conducted a field study on a procurement cycle in a leading European bank to test the effectiveness of the process mining in auditing. And after understanding the main activities, the first step was to understand what the main activities are, the design of them. And then they had to conduct an event log to understand how the actual process was carried out. So this is an example of the design of a procurement process. These are the steps that are required to happen. And this is the event log that they came up with. And as you can see, there are deviations. Not every creation of a purchase order was signed, for example, at the second number of they also analyzed the number of variants, which is the unique sequence of activities in the event log. They identified 304 different variants in the process. They dealt with the amount of variants because they had a very big number. They used fuzzy minor algorithm to visualize it and make it easier to understand. They also did role analysis to examine the parts played by employees in the procurement process. This is usually used to detect segregation of duties violations. So you can't have the same person, for example, sign and pay the money, and you can use that by using the metadata of in the historical database. Social analysis was also conducted, where the originator entry of every event was used to construct a social network demonstrating all interactions between the employees involved in the process. You can then use this network to compare compare it against the design organizational structure and see who's dealing with whom. This is the number of variants. They took the first 6. As you can see, like the first 3 account for 80% of all the transactions. The first one is what the designed process was. The second one had changes, but when they talked to the management, they told them that it was okay because it was before signing the purchase order. But the ones that needed further investigation was, I think, 3 because they didn't have a signed activity. So the major advantage of utilizing process mining in auditing is the reliance on data that is independently produced from a system and not like subjective. You don't get it from interviews with people working in the company. And the ability to examine the whole population instead of what's happening now. Like traditionally, auditors just take a few samples. But the major concern, I thought, would be the huge amount of variance or processes that need further examination. So it would be interesting to look at other areas in machine learning that can complement process mining by limiting maybe the number of exceptions we have.
Questions? Thank you.